Hi guys, welcome to Season Mind. It's been a while, so it's going to be a bit of catch up about some of the things that stood up to me in the middle of the week. Well, not really in the middle, but throughout the week. Yeah, and yes, scenery has changed. I'm shooting from my sister's place. It looks a little bit more, not a little bit, significantly more aesthetically pleasing than where I shot the last video. And so I thought, you know what, it's a holiday in Kenya, and why not? Right? So for today on the books, it's going to be, we're going to talk a little bit about corporate culture. A couple of things happened in the office, and yeah, I'd like to unpack them with you guys here. I'll talk about domestic violence or gender-based violence, and then we'll also talk a little bit about some 2026, like new resolution planning, so to speak, some things that I'm looking forward to, and hoping that this is a space that will help me, actualize them and get committed to them to the end. So yeah, just to kick it off, there's a thing that happens in the office where you have brown noses. So called brown noses, it comes from, for the most part, not the best place, because it comes from the phrase ass kissing or booty licking. That is when someone really plays to seniority and you're trying so much to get in someone good's book. So the assumption is that if you're doing that, feces are going to end up on your nose. So yes, that's where brown nosing comes from. So brown nosing is something that we're going to talk about, and it really came to play in our office. Now, I'm removed from this trip. This is just me observing, and it was like, come on, like we're adults here. Why are we behaving like this? But again, I feel like kids may act better than adults. So this is what happened. So the company that I'm working for, it's like a new organization in the country that's outsourcing some of its services that it was doing in the UK, and it's now doing it in Kenya. So effectively we are working remotely but in the office. Now a couple of guys have joined much earlier but still within this year, so they had just finished the probation, and so it was like confirmation conversations taking place. So for this specific team, they have like a team lead who, at least so I came in like 3 months after the first group. So from my the observation of the team lead, it was one of those guys where when you see someone and they're like a walking red flag, but you just don't know it, you just can't prove it yet. So I already had that going into mind, but now yes, she's team lead of that team and that department. However, however is not the right word. So they're coming in and they're having their confirmation conversations, and there's like 5 of them. So there's two camps that are taking part in this confirmation conversations. And so we have one person who's like a huge brown nose, like anything the team lead says, it's like a yes. And mind you, let me jump the gun a bit. He's the one who gets like straight up confirmed. And now there's another guy who plays neutral. Now, personally, not a fan of the neutral peeps where, like stand for something. Like, I, on a level, as much as like I don't like brown noses, on some level, I respect their game. Because like we can clearly see this is like selfish interest. I'm doing this to have this. It's predictable. But the neutral people, it's like lukewarm type of thing. And I mean, even God doesn't like that. So, not God, but it's just one of those things. Like, pick a side, right? So there's a neutral guy, and then there's the 2 other people in the team who are like, yeah, I'm just gonna be normal. So if something isn't right, I'll call it out. If it's not right, I'll call it out. So they have this conversation, so these meetings, and obviously the brown nose that gets confirmed, but now the team lead has an issue with the other 2 guys who are, I'd say, acting a little bit more adult, where if there's a problem, if something's not working out, they'll tell you to your face, they'll call you out or something. Well, not really call you out gets a bad rep, but like they'll inform you of what's taking place, right? So they don't get confirmed, and they're told that their issue is team collaboration. So for context, it's not the team lead that does the confirmations bit, it's the HR of the company. So the HR and a couple of team members in the UK help do this approval process, because it's still in a transitionary phase. So that happens, and they told her, we're gonna put you in like another 3 weeks to observe your collaboration, because the collaboration that you used to have before, it's no longer there. Mind you, I don't get that, because collaboration, you're looking at it in terms of the team lead. Why are you faulting the team members and not the team leader? Like it didn't make no sense. So team leader got confirmed, right? Brown noser gets confirmed. Neutral party gets confirmed. And this is what irks me with neutral people, especially in the corporate culture, where for the longest part, it's as though he's with the people who are acting a little bit more adult, like speaking up on their issues. But I mean, his reaction when he got confirmed was like, "Yeah, I did this. Like I've always been good." And I'm like, weren't you the one who a couple of days when your friends hadn't been confirmed yet, and you knew that could have been a possibility for you, were like, this is not wrong, this is unfair, should correct this, there's no way you can just, put something like that on someone. But then, now when you, with your neutrality, get crossed above that line, it's almost as though everything is okay. So yeah, that was the office for me this weekend. I was just like, man, these neutral folk, they're not that interesting. So I don't know how that's going to play out. And I think the reason why I have a little bit of confidence talking about like my current workplace is because I'm actively looking for a new place of work, and I have so much confidence that this video will not blow up before I get that next job. Or if it does blow up, then actually it becomes that next job, right? But yeah, so I'm actively looking for a new job, and it's one of the things that I also wanted to talk about. Yeah, so we've handled the corporate culture bit, which it was just a little bit weird, something that happened in the middle of the week. But something else is, how do you guys look for jobs? So I've had this conversation with friends, acquaintances, and literally just people who we share the same space with. And at least for the Kenyan market, everybody says like, I graduated with this, I did this, and I did this, and I did this. But the market is so tough, everything is not working out. So how do you handle a tough market? That's a question that's asked. You obviously can't be doing things the same way. And this is not to minimize job search, right? It's someone who is currently looking for a job, has looked for jobs before, has been rejected, in some, like, I get it. I really do get how difficult that process is. But something that sticks out to me more often than not is that the people who complain are often the problem. Like, if I'm the company and say they were my friend, like, I'd hire them solely because they're my friend, but not because they stood out during the hiring process. Here's why. Indulge me a bit. I know that may feel like a very lewd take, but when you look at it, it's because of things such as your positioning. So how do you position yourself when you're doing job applications? So there's the one where you apply for the roles, right? How are you applying for the roles? So you'll need probably a cover letter, a resume, or a CV. Use those interchangeably. I don't really know what the fuss is about using either one, but yeah, you need your cover letter, you need your resume. Now, oftentimes you also need your LinkedIn to be like really good. So those three things, like this, let's optimize those three things. Now let's start with the resume a bit. The resume, for the most part, it knocks quite a bit of people out of the conversation, really. Previously, I think like 2 companies ago, I used to work at a recruitment firm where they were doing recruitment for like high-level executives. Now, one thing that I realized that with the high-level execs, so we're talking CEOs, managing directors, C-suite level, pretty much, or director level type of thing, and even the board level. Board level, oftentimes they don't even have a resume. It's normally good. It's like your network, so we're reaching out to people in different industries and they're telling us things. The CEOs have like, I think that's what deserves to be called a CV, because it's long. It's like a really long list of what they've done, because they've been in like various companies. And for them, it wasn't even about, how does it look? It was more about what's the content. So we actually had to read because of the level of the role. But now, I had other people in the company who were working for, say, talent acquisition, where it was a little bit junior roles. There, your CV really played a huge role. For the longest time, I used to hear this concept of, recruiters will only take like 6 minutes to review your resume. This is just assuming that your resume actually passed the initial phase, and the initial phase is with the passing the AT as such. So we're like, AI or some sort of machine technology goes through your resume first, and then it either classes yours, you pushes this to the recruiter. Yes, you can look to this, and there's obviously like keyword matching in there, but for that level specifically, the recruiters do actually take 6 to 8 seconds thereabout to look at your resume. So how do you do this as a recruiter? It feels very harsh, but say you're recruiting for like 5 roles. For each of these 5 roles in Kenya, you get about say 100 to like 300 on the lower end type of roles. Say that they're very niche, maybe like they're text based, so it's not like everybody's gonna send out your resume. Mind you, if this is more like a general business type of role where it's not really specific to a specific industry, and just anybody who, I'd say, qualifies behaviorally is able to apply for the role, you'd get crazier numbers on that side. So say you're recruiting for 5 roles, you're not going to take that much time looking at all of those resumes. So the first thing that you do is when the resumes come, you take like those first 6 seconds and just it's like you're flipping pages. You're flipping pages on your desktop where it's like, nah, doesn't fit. So it one matters how much information are you able to pack within one page. So first call out is that make your resume one page long, because nobody's going to do the scrolling thing. And if it's 2 pages, say it's a printout, nobody's going to look to the next page. So how are you highlighting them? Like, I remember seeing resumes of some guys who still having your marital status on in there, you have your postal office on in there, and I'm like, nobody uses postal office, at least in Kenya anymore. Like, I get that for like the States or other places, and even that, I still really doubt that they do that, because most of the conversations need to take place on email. Like, we're not doing applications for jobs using USPS or FedEx or something like that. So at the end of the day, we really don't need that. So it's a lot of jargon that's being packed in there. And then another thing was, in the resumes, you'd see someone still mentioning their high school and their primary school and the grades they got, and it was just like facepalm. Like, what do you mean that's what you're putting in your resume? So like, folks are not really hireable in terms of how they present themselves. So resume aside, cover letter, oftentimes it was a replica and a replication of the resume, and like, you're not adding any spice to it. So for example, you're applying to a faith-based organization, then it means that your cover letter, because you're not going to be able to talk about how close or spiritual you are with God in the resume, in the cover letter you're going to get into like the nitty-gritties, the details, and like the inner workings of it. So in the cover letter, it's like, yes, I'm taking from the resume, right? But I'm also taking from, okay, this is how the mission and vision of that company ties with me. Like, look at their impact report, look at their financial reports, like, what's the company about? This is where you get to talk about like growth within the company, look at the various profiles of the people working in there. Then the third bit in this just positioning yourself type of thing is your LinkedIn. Now, a lot of people hate LinkedIn, and probably the reason why you hate LinkedIn is because you've been on there, you've been making the applications, and you've not gotten anything, right? So, first of all, check, are you good with the first two? The third thing that we were talking about is your LinkedIn profile. For the most part, we don't even really need to talk about your LinkedIn profile, because if we were being very candid and you've been applying for jobs, and the first issue is that you're not getting interviews, you're not getting callbacks, it's obviously, obviously it's not the right word, but it's most likely that your resume or your CV is not right. Your cover letter isn't doing you any favors, isn't doing you any justice, right? So when we come into your LinkedIn, it's like they don't even get to click there. The recruiters don't even get to click on the LinkedIn that you have on your resume, because they weren't wowed with your resume to begin with. But let's speak about LinkedIn. So most of the time, the reason why guys don't like LinkedIn, like I've said, it's because you haven't been getting any callbacks to the jobs you've applied on there, and it's almost as though LinkedIn doesn't really work. Now, I can say confidently that LinkedIn works, even for a Kenyan context, because I've had like 3-4 jobs right now, and all of them have been direct from LinkedIn. Like, not like LinkedIn gave them to me, but I saw them on LinkedIn, and that's where I applied to them. So when that's a scenario and that's a landscape that you're looking at it, then obviously you have to optimize your LinkedIn. I mean, this time I was helping one of my friends review their LinkedIn profile, and we graduated from same uni, do the same program, and in terms of work experience, he actually started working a little bit earlier than me, but for some reason his LinkedIn is so much tamer than mine. Like, the profile photo is just off. It was like a selfie photo, and I'm like, how exactly are you doing that? How are you able to do that on a professional platform? Like LinkedIn is not your Instagram, so you really can't treat it like that. And something that also stood out to me is the profile photos are not right. The titling and like using search engines isn't right. The way that you're putting your experience, like for a lot of people, for the most part, they were doing it in terms of, all right, here is the job description of the role that I have. I'm like, how is that helpful? Like, use language that the industry would know. Use language that's going to be within the job description so that it makes sense to whoever is trying to recruit you. So say you have something like your role is, say, data analyst, because I'm in the data field, and the role that you're given is, the job description says you will collate and analyze data, depending on a need basis. Now, how do you write that in terms of a bullet point? So probably you've analyzed data before, you've collated data before, but how do you put this in terms of a bullet point? You have to talk about it in what we call an XYZ format, and this is also something that you use for the bullet points in your resume. But that is, you have to show that everything that you did within that role had an intended impact. It had a result that nobody or somebody couldn't have seen, right? So that's something that you really ought to watch out for and always have a keen eye to it. So LinkedIn is like search engine optimization for your job search. So your LinkedIn really, really, really has to be spot on. It really has to be good in terms of presentability, because getting in, we can always talk about, like, I think for the most part, this is just how to get an interview. It's not really even how to get a job, it's how to get an interview. Because once we get into that and cross that, it's now a whole other conversation about how do you interview, right? So those are the three things. So you have your CV, you have your CV or resume, you have your cover letter, and then you have your LinkedIn. For me, I normally have a fourth one. Now the fourth one is on the networking piece. If I'm applying to a job, obviously the jobs that I apply to, and it's just like, yeah, I'll apply to this if they call me back, whatever. But then the other jobs that are very dedicated, it's like a really dedicated search because I really want to work at this company. So for that company, I go in and look at who's in the department that I want to join, who would potentially be my reporting manager, who's within the talent acquisition team. Same, still on LinkedIn, right? See how useful LinkedIn is. Try and connect with them on LinkedIn. That way, once I'm able to connect with them, then I can spark a conversation, because there's no way I'm paying for premium. I mean, like, premium is a little too expensive if you ask me. So you do that networking piece. Now, once you're able to get that in, if you use a platform such as Lucia, maybe they don't respond to you. If you use a platform such as Lucia, you're able to get their company email addresses. So whether, for example, my name is Jeff, right? So it could be jeff@xyzcompany.com, right? So for that specific person, and then you email them directly, talk about why you'd be a good fit. When you're sending out that email, it's not really like the cover letter. It's more why I'd be a good fit for this team. How my value aligns with that. Feels a little bit cover letter-y, but it's a little bit different, because like now you know an intended recipient. So when you do that, for the most part, I found it a little bit more successful. You're going to get callbacks. So case in point, before, again, Trump did his dirty with the layoff. So before I got laid off as a result of DJ Trump, right? I had a scenario where I wasn't really applying to jobs, so I wasn't really getting callbacks, and I think I did like 5 applications within a span of a year, got only 2. But then after that, now during that layoff period, was now just spamming application after application after application. And I can see, like, I've gotten so many, calls and interviews, but it's like turning them down because they're not within the budget or price range that I want to move to. Like, what I have currently works best. And so 2 other things that I'd add to it. So we're at like 4. So 4 was your resume, your cover letter, your LinkedIn, and the 4th one that we added as a final piece was your networking on those social platforms, right? But if I'm to add a little bit more to this, it's also within how you show yourself, how you show your work, right? How you show your work in terms of, say I'm a data analyst, how would my projects be visible? So that means you're either going to post them on LinkedIn in terms of, hey, look at this cool dashboard that I did here. I implemented these technologies. Like pull up a call out within that and say, like, to any organization that's small and medium, I think we can work together pro bono, so that you're getting yourself known within that industry, right? So people get to know you. So that's how you're positioning yourself. Say you're in like marketing. I feel like if I reduce marketing to just a poster, people will get offended. But say you're into marketing and you design a poster or a campaign strategy of something. Say, pick a company that exists actually. Say you pick Pepsi. Pepsi competes with Coca-Cola, but it often always loses. So how would you approach Pepsi marketing in terms of from a marketing perspective? Sorry. So you go on there, come up with a strategy, and share it. Share it online. Share it on LinkedIn. Have a YouTube channel about it. Again, it's not really about the views, but it's more about putting yourself out there. So when somebody comes in, they're like, "Yo, this guy is actually really, really good," and that allows them to have that first conversation with you. And I think there's a lot of things that go into posturing yourself just to get into the interview, just to get into the door. Then we can start talking about, a lot of these things. I feel like I've gone on a little bit of a rant in terms of, job applications and stuff, but it's just because it's one of those conversations that when we have, it's oftentimes guys are complaining, but nobody really wants to take accountability in terms of, hey, maybe I haven't done this as well, and I could improve this other areas. Because I kid you not, sure, you know what? Leave it in the comment section. Say that you've tried everything. Give me your email address in the comment section. I'll make sure to email you and see, and just ask you, show me your resume. Show me your resume. Show me your recent cover letter. Show me your LinkedIn. I normally do this like on the side for like other people as a client, but you reach out through the YouTube channel. I'll make sure it's free for you, and I'll just do the whole review for you right there. Because I'm very convinced that for the most part, it's that marketing piece. It's that marketing yourself, like selling yourself piece that a lot of people aren't really doing. So something else that I wanted us to talk about requires a little bit more calm was domestic violence and gender-based violence as a whole. So for the length of this conversation and the length of this topic, sexual-based violence and gender-based violence, hand in hand. I'm going to be using those interchangeably, so it's not that I'm getting confused, but at least that's how I see them based off of the study and the research that I've done so far on this topic. Yes, that's it. So what even qualifies me to have this conversation? Obviously, I don't look the part. I don't look the gender to complain. Not that men don't face gender-based violence, but because it disproportionately affects women. But why would I be talking about this? So let's rewind a little bit. In 2021, as part of the Red Bull Basement competition, where my idea was to pitch an app and develop an app called Speak Up. Speak Up was supposed to be an application that helps in terms of gender violence reporting, and the way you do it would be able to collect this information from users of the application, and they'd be able to share their experiences, and from that we'd use some sort of machine learning technology to group and cluster them, come up with profiles, identify similarities in different cases, because oftentimes it's like repeat offenders, and then work in tandem with local authorities to be able to get some form of justice, and it was also supposed to function as allowing people to be heard. Sources of funding for it would be in terms of grants, in terms of amplifying the usage of the app, but also in terms of selling the data in an anonymized way to be able to further research within this topic to institutions that are concerned about this, to talk about UN Women or the World Health Organization. So that's where most of my research around this came into play. Again, I've grown up raised by women for the most part, and this has given me a different perspective onto some conversations. So I find that more often than I'd like, I get a little bit pause when I'm having conversations with men, and things such as marriage and things such as gender-based violence come up as a topic. There's often pause, and you're like, how do you think like this? But anyway, so something sparked this conversation. So I've been thinking about this for a while, but what irked me was sometime this week within the Kenyan socials, there was a guy who made a comment, and it was along the lines of, I can't remember it exactly. I think it was also in Swahili, so it would be a mess in terms of translating it. But um, if he had his way with a particular lady in a video, something wouldn't have happened, with a connotation of like there would have been violence involved to be able to control that situation. So let's demystify. So what's sexual-based violence? What's gender-based violence? And domestic violence for this case. So domestic violence oftentimes covers both of them, but for the most part, it's used to refer to violence directed towards women, particularly because, again, disproportionately they're the ones affected the most by this sort of violence, in as much as reporting is still an issue, right? So even before we get into that, let's unpack it. So sexual violence reporting, only about a third of cases get reported. When women and ladies are surveyed, it shows that more than half of them have experienced gender-based violence, oftentimes in a sexual nature as well. Most perpetrators are often within the families, so thinking dads, uncles, nephews, cousins, nieces. That's where most of the violence takes place, boyfriends as well. And then something else is that of the percentage that gets reported, most of them don't go all the way to prosecution and, let's say, justice in that case. So yeah, that's the thing on the reporting side. But now let's get into it. Let's get an understanding. So what exactly is gender-based violence? This is disproportionately you being on the receiving end of this form of violence, particularly and solely because you're female, because you're a woman, right? I'm going to use female and woman again interchangeably because, again, for the context that I'm speaking, that's how it's classed in Kenya. So in this case, somebody makes the argument that why wouldn't you just class it as, say, if in the case of murder, just homicide or just violence, aggravated assault, right? But there's need to class it separately. Because when you look at it from the psyche of the perpetrator, the main reason why you're being either beaten or you're being killed or you're being raped and anything is being done to you, it's oftentimes because of where you are on the position of power, where you are on that hierarchy, where as society sits, it's as though that women come in as second-class citizens, and because of that power dynamic, somebody sees that they have, is authority? No, authority isn't the right word. They have dominion over who you are and over your being, and therefore this violence is perpetrated against you. So you find that, let's say in the case of, you go into a store and you're being confronted by something. Let's just say there's a commotion in there, but you get beat. Not because of what you did, not because there's a commotion, but because the person sees that you're inferior to them in that hierarchy, or you shouldn't be having that confrontation with them. And the reason why they get justification off of this is because, for the most part, they're male and you're female in that scenario. So that's the one lens that we can say, like, blanket most of gender-based violence and how it falls. Now, oftentimes it's intimate partner relationships that suffer the most for it, and there's been the phrase going around where that marriage is for fools, and that's because it almost seems, especially for women, is that you're just going to be on the receiving end for this, right? And it's one of those things where when these are the types of conversations that are taking place, then we really ought to unpack this topic so that we don't, I'd say, destroy an institution such as marriage, which ought to have, its benefits to both parties, right? And so this is one of the conversations that I wanted us to have today. Now, with that very, very long introduction, let me get my note, because for this I had to write down. Now, a couple of things that were coming up was, why can't the people, the victims and potential survivors, just leave? That's a question that comes up a lot. Like, if you're being beaten, why wouldn't you just leave? Like, why are you subjecting yourself and your body to that? But there's two things to it. For the most part, we've talked about a power dynamic being there. Think of intimate partner relationships where it's the man who's the breadwinner of the household, even if there aren't kids in the picture. But a lot of, let's say, our societies, Kenyan societies, African societies, by and large, have made it such that even if the woman works, the money still goes to the man first, and then it's redistributed back to you. So you're not around the decision making in terms of being financially free. That's why you see a lot of non-governmental, international non-governmental organizations that are coming into the country go in and try and do a lot in terms of empowering the women financially. In as much as that also has the unintended consequence of creating conflict within the home, but it's in terms of giving somebody the leverage they need to be able to, actually make that decision that, I'm packing up, I'm leaving today. Because when you're not allowed to go back to, for the most part, you're not allowed to go back to your parents' home, see, after marriage. And oftentimes you find that it's not that you've even been married, you're young, but you're facing that violence from your uncles, from your dad even, in some instances. And this comes up quite a bit, and you can't just class and leave. So we've gone past that. So you can't just say just leave, because clearly they can't, because of that imbalance in power dynamic. You talk about, okay, you can save a little bit of money in there and hide money, so that at some day when that rainy day comes in and you have all of your resources and you can just up and leave. But oftentimes this has been proven to result into more violence if and when it's found out, and it's more likely an when instead of an if, because say you're doing some work that you've been prohibited to do and you're like stacking up your cash. At some point, again, there's no secret outside of one person, so whatever it is that you're banking societally, or whether it's you're paid a certain amount, you find that the perpetrator often has access to this kinds of information, so they'll know that you're hiding from them, and that leads to even to more violence. So that's one. You can't use the argument of just leave. So that's a really, call it even a fallacy. It's separating yourself from the problem so that you're not part of the solution, right? So we can't use just leave. Now, the other conversation that's going to come up is discourse around the fact that someone has the money. So you can see that a lady has the money. She's stable, comes from very 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 well learned, has higher education and all of that, has a good job, and is still experiencing this. Why wouldn't they leave? And this is where two things that we're going to talk about. So it's Stockholm syndrome and golden calf. Don't think golden calf is still a syndrome, but the Stockholm syndrome is when you've been conditioned with abuse for so long, for so much time in your life, and oftentimes it starts from you as a kid. So how much violence have you experienced as a kid, especially from the male role models in your life, so from your dads, from your uncles, and all of these things? How long have you experienced that? And then it almost rewires your brain where that's the sort of love that you crave. That's your norm. And now when you come into this intimate partner relationship, and the reason why I'm using this a lot is because, again, that's where most of it takes place. So it's not that I'm attacking relationships or marriage, I'm pro that. But the reason why it's a problem is because of these situations where you're with your abuser, and it gets to a point where your brain has to sort of romanticize the scenario so that you're able to live in it. Like, your brain has to protect your body, where in as much as you're getting beat and you're going through this at that particular time, you're still then able to find a normal, so that you're out of that state of I am really going through a lot. So there's Stockholm syndrome in a nutshell is where you crave the relationship of your abuser or of who's hurting you, because your brain has had to rewire itself, and it's something that has been proven time and time again. So it's not something that we can really come in and say, so why can't you just leave? You have the resources. So there's that one bit. But then there's also the golden calves, right? Where you're a cat person in the house, where everything is being done for you, and the price for that is that you get beat. So for the most part, you find that a lot of ladies, a lot of people in these situations will subject themselves, or will allow themselves to be subject to that sort of torture in that difficult life, just because there's a reward of, my bills are being taken care of, like I have food, I have shelter, I have the basics, right? And for the most part, it's a basic. It's not even the luxury. So the golden cup isn't really golden. It's more copper, And even for the case of the people who have golden cups, it's because how would you face society having been where you've been, right? And going down. So those are some of the things that I think you ought to look at when you're having this discourse with people. It was just one of those things that I thought it's important to highlight. I really don't think we can unpack everything around domestic violence and violence in intimate partner relationships in one seating. I think it needs discourse where I have someone else who's giving a divergent opinion, and then we film that conversation. But still, it's one of those things that I've seen take place, and it's just like, come on, let's fix something, right? So, what do we do from here? How do we enact some form of change, right? I think the way we get to enacting some form of change is when we, as people, both men and women, decide to have these conversations, right? When you see somebody make a comment that's really, really, I'd say sexist for the most part, because I feel like that's where it begins, where you start devaluing the other gender. That's when it clicks to you that, I can do this just because of, the benefits I have as being a man, which is, for the most part, there are biological benefits that you're going to get in terms of, muscle mass, bone density, and all of these things. So effectively, the average man will be stronger than the average woman, right? And even if we go into like athletics, the most peak male athlete will always be leaps beyond the best female athlete. Unfortunately, that's the case, right? So when you look into things like those, I think it's important to have this conversation, at least start within those who you think can reason. Because the reason why I say that is because I've tried having these conversations with people who, say, allergic or averse to reasoning, averse to thinking, and it's a very annoying and difficult conversation to have, because someone just simply isn't able to see the other point of view. I know some people, when you're having this discourse, they're like, no, but I don't have to, tell you that. What if it was your mom? What if it was your daughter, for it to click to you? But I'd say, appeal to the emotion. So, right? So appeal to the emotion where possible, where bring it closer to home for them, because unfortunately for most people in the world, unless it's taking place where it affects me, I'm not really going to listen to it. So let's appeal to the emotion, have these conversations, and correct them in their tracks. Where, I have this scenario, even in church settings, where it's like food is being brought. So, for example, we're having a potluck. This pisses me off. We're having a potluck on Sunday, and it almost always irks me that the gents are just being told to bring in juice. I think I spoke about it in another video, where again we're just reaffirming those roles. And I think once we start, it's okay for us to have gender roles, but have gender roles in a setting where it's defined. Say you're in a marriage and you guys have defined, I'll do this, but you can't have gender roles for strangers. Like we're like a mixture, we're a cocktail of people, and they're from different backgrounds. So we really have to figure out, a way around this. So just one of the things that let's think about it, let's find solutions, right? Let's talk about the reporting, let's talk about how we can change minds, because if you're only empowering on that one hand, it's not really going to work out. So if you're only empowering the ladies, but you're not really doing a lot in terms of changing what men are taught and what they know, it's not really going to work out. Because I see that difference, that stark difference between me who's been raised by women for the most part, compared to men who have either been closer to their paternal side. And it's like night and day, unfortunately. It's like night and day. But there's so much that we can do in terms of changing that perspective and changing that game. And so I just wanted to have this conversation here. If you have any thoughts, put it in the comment. I can react to it, get follow-up videos, and definitely this is a topic that we'll talk about again. We'll definitely have to talk about it again, because there's so many layers to unpack. If we talk about things such as emotional intelligence as it pertains to counsel that's given to victims and potential future survivors, is that there's also the resentment that comes from survivors of domestic violence, especially when they had to do it on their own, and you had to pull yourself quite literally by the bootstraps. to be able to get out of that situation where there's resentment to women or people who are still within those abusive relationships because you see it as though the only way that you can live is by doing it yourself. So it irks you when you see someone like giving up or just being comfortable in an abusive scenario because you want them like do it for yourself. So there's like can you give your former self grace enough so that you're able to extend that grace to someone who hasn't yet gotten to the point to make the decision that you're able to make? So there's so many things that we can talk about when it comes to this, and I think it's definitely another conversation to have with more research, and like it feels like something that should be a round table. So even if it's not like guys seeing my face, but I have enough people around me that it makes sense to have that conversation, right? Yeah. I think final things, I didn't want to end on that note, so yeah, final things. 2026 is upon us. 2026 is upon us. And I have a goal, right? Where for me, the goal is to lose weight. I'm looking at dropping 15 kilos. Yep. If I'm being honest, it should be like 20. Because 15 would put me at, I think about like 12, 13 or maybe 14% body fat. But like right now I'm a little chubby. Like my face is so much rounder than like there's no jawline, and I think that's one of the goals. Like it's very vain, if I'm being honest. Like if I read through Solomon's writing, it like vanity of vanities, right? But for the most part, it's something that I think I want to achieve. And yes, it's one of those where there's little control that I have. Well, I have quite a bit of control, but I still want to do it. I still really, really, really want to do this, and I want to ensure that everything works out perfectly for me. There's a trouser that I want. It's like waist 32, and it requires me to also have like really narrow legs, and it's one of those things that I really need. I don't need, but I want it. And so yeah, 2026, about to drop 15 to 20 kilos by I think June. I think that's a good timeline. It's a bit more realistic than some of the things that I've set for myself in the past. And it's also part of a bet, because a lot of people, including my sister, who doesn't think that I can drop those kilos within that time frame. So it's in the proving wrong as well. It's in the proving wrong that I will find glory. But yeah, that's it for this long episode. I'll put it as a whole and then clip it into bits, because I feel like it's gone all over the place, and that's actually how I wanted this YouTube channel. And it's kind of, I don't have the microphone, so I won't call it a podcast, but yeah, that's kind of the direction that I wanted this channel to take moving forward. And then from then on, I'll just be able to, for the most part, just clip them so that if you just want to pick one bit and go with the LinkedIn, go with the gender-based violence stuff, go with the 2026 New Year resolution stuff. So also you guys set something for yourself. So I'm supposed to perfect my swimming technique because I want to podium at a sprint triathlon next year. So that's something to look forward for. I think I'll post a clip at the end so that you just see like it's so real. Like you're finding a lot of people who are kind of obsessed with fitness, not really even obsessed with like fitness and going through that direction. So yeah, that's something that I want to do. I think if I start now, I'll be able to beat the couch potato allegations, and I'll be able to keep off what I would have lost. But yeah, that's it, guys. I was about to say have a wonderful evening because it's about to get into evening. But yeah, enjoy your time. Leave me some comments and feedbacks in the comment section. And till next time, bye bye.